Hello and welcome to another episode of the STRETTYCAST. This week myself and Mike are going to look back at the Champions League encounter between Manchester United and Barcelona in 1994, the first game at Old Trafford, which ended 2-2. Mike, how are you since we last spoke?
Yeah, I'm good. It's a beautiful day down here in London. I have just spent a large proportion of this afternoon doing research for the next load of Icons pieces. So the next three is going to be the Holy Trinity. All get their own pieces. So Charlton, Best and Law.
Oh, very good, very good. The one we put out this week with Billy Murder was excellent as well. I think the way in which you wrote that one, it was more like for a general football fan. It was like a profile of Billy Murdoch's kind of background as well as his time at United.
Yeah, and he was such an important figure. For United, I mean, let's break it down. Manchester United had not won any major trophy before he arrived. And then within 4 years of him being at the club, they'd won a league, I think 2 league titles and an FA Cup. So that was the difference he made, and he was a huge figure in the game as well.
The original catalyst.
I think so. He was probably one of. If you look at, you talk about old football, it's a very, very different game, completely different. And he was I would say, the first one who you can really sort of draw a thread from to the modern game. I think you look at him, and then someone like Herbert Chapman, who was the Arsenal manager in the 20s, would be the other one as well. And actually, I think the United manager at the time, when Meredith was signed, whose name has just escaped me at the moment, but he was originally the manager of Man City, then came over to United after a match fixing scandal. Just before the match fixing scandal, and then decided to bring Billy Meredith with him. So, yeah, really, really interesting guy. A lot to pick through with him. And then the next thing I'm looking forward to. So I've got everything done for the Bobby Charlton one. When you really go through everything with Bobby Charlton, he is, as far as I'm concerned, the best footballer England has ever produced. They've never produced a better player than Charlton.
No, absolutely. I think they produced some great ones, and in the game we're gonna cover. One particular player was named captain, which Dennis Law said at the start. Well, if he's captain for England, he might as well be captain for United. Ince, that the game we watched this week, the 2-2 against Barcelona. That was the game you came to me. You wanted to review. What a game! What an encounter it was.
It was, and this is still at a stage where not just United, but English clubs in general, really in Europe, were not good. The context of this, I think, the clubs were only about 2 years removed from coming back into European football after the Heysel ban. So Leeds were the first team to play in this competition in 92 for their league title in 91, and then obviously United the next season, 93-94, didn't get past the first round. They got tapped by Galatasaray in that pretty infamous tie that I mentioned in a fair bit of detail in the piece about Eric Cantona, the second part of the Eric Cantona Icons piece that I wrote. So this was our second season back in Europe. It was the first time we'd been in Europe since, I think, 1984. 1991 was the first time we'd been in Europe since 84. And it's weird, if you look at those times we were in European competitions, you got here, and then you got 91 when we were in the Cup Winners' Cup. And then before that, I think it was the 84 Cup Winners' Cup. Barcelona is sort of is the team that crops up in every one of those to link things through. They are in many, many ways. I look at them and probably Real Madrid and Juventus and Bayern as clubs that are just seemingly inextricably linked to United in European football.
Yeah, of course, and all these clubs, they're institutions of the game. The Barcelona we're talking here with, you see traits in the game of how their tactics kind of allowed Ronald Koeman to stem up into the opponent's half, which led to their second goal in the game with a great assist. But these are clubs that had the likes of Alex Ferguson, Johan Cruyff, and philosophers of the game really, and people that kind of thought outside the box and were successful. Ronald Koeman in the game, tactically, everything kind of stemmed through him. The vast majority of Barcelona's attacks came from him playing the ball out from the back, and we talk about that a lot nowadays in the transfer market when teams are looking for defenders, about ball playing centre backs. He was a incredible one. He was unbelievable.
But he was almost not really a centre half. He was a playmaking midfielder who just played. It's not something you really get in the game right now, but it was more common sort of really from the 1960s all the way through to the early 1990s, which was the libero, which was essentially a playmaking centre half. Started with the Italians. They used to have it as part of the Catenaccio system, so a very, very deep lying playmaker. So like the Ince team in the 60s was a guy called Luis Suarez, the original Luis Suarez. He used to play that role. And then obviously Beckenbauer came through at that time. Germany actually had two. They had a guy called Horst Blankenberg as well. He played for the great Ajax team in the late 1960s, who won 3 European Cups on the trot. You had, I think Ruud Krol did sort of a job like that for Holland. And then obviously you got Frank Rijkaard, who came through later on, and then Ronald Koeman as well. So it was, and in fact, Ruud Gullit became that kind of player later in his career. I think the last player I've seen who did that job was a guy who used to play for Barcelona called Rafael Marquez, who was a centre half, but who was ostensibly a deep line playmaker. He was a magnificent player. In a bit of legal trouble now, I believe, for having links to. Yeah, I think having links to a large drug cartel in Mexico, which is, it's a little bit like, the story that's come out recently about Ronaldinho being arrested with a fake passport in Paraguay. These bizarre stories of what happens if players when they leave. But he's the last one I saw who was really in that mould. Maybe David Luiz, but David Luiz doesn't have the kind of in-game intelligence to sort of be at the level of a guy like Koeman.
No, absolutely.
And the teams are really interesting, actually. I mean, you look at that Barcelona team. The video we watched of this game was the original Granada ITV broadcast when they used to have the Champions League. You just always had that thing in your head. I just always feel like the European football doesn't feel quite as special now as it did then. I think part of it is you just didn't see these other teams as much. But I do think ITV did. I don't know, it was the fact that you could see a game on terrestrial television as well on free-to-air TV. And actually the coverage was really good. It was like, God, this is way back. Bob Wilson presenting. You had Terry Venables and Dennis Law, the pundits of this game.
I have to say,
actually, what a really switched-on, smart, great talker Dennis Law actually was.
Yeah.
It is. He's such a sharp guy. He's got a great mind for the game.
Did you see how at the beginning of the coverage, when he introduced Venables and Law, they were so happy when he was mentioning two of the greatest footballers or whatever. They were real humble. They were like Cheshire cats smiling. It was that, it wasn't like nowadays where kind of people that are in those positions as pundits, they're so comfortable, they're so media trained. Praise like that doesn't quite, get the same smile.
No, definitely not. And Terry Venables is great as well. I always have a lot of time for Terry Venables, actually. He was a really good... It's sort of overlooked, actually, what a good manager Terry Venables was. This is a guy who won the league title with Barcelona. He got into a European Cup final in the 80s. Really, really good manager. And again, did a fantastic job when he was in charge of England. Great game. And then the commentators as well, which is Brian Moore and Kevin Keegan. And you always forget with Keegan because we kind of mock him now, what happened with the league title race. But again, great mind for the game. Could love to talk about football. You could see he absolutely loved this Barcelona team, and he loved the approach that Cruyff took. And I think there was to some extent, I think because Keegan played a big proportion, a significant proportion of his career in Europe. That was where he won the Ballon d'Or when he played for Hamburg and won the European Cup with them. That he really had a greater grasp of the European game than I think a lot of English football people did at that time. And the Barca team is really interesting. I mean, you've got Carlos Busquets in goal, who is the father of Sergio Busquets. Actually, he was the one who got Sergio Busquets a trial in at the club when people weren't interested in taking him. He was basically a sweeper keeper. And then essentially, for all purposes, there was only really two proper defenders in this team, in Jose Abelardo and Miguel Nadal, the beast.
Nadal was fantastic.
He was an unbelievable player. Could play midfield, of course, as well. I think there was a bit about 5 minutes into the game where Barca was like picking a ball around. And Barca really struggled in the first half, actually. United were all over him in that first half. But they moved the ball forward, and suddenly Nadal, who's supposed to be one of the two only proper centre-halves that they have, makes this surging run. He's come, obviously, from way in his own half, and he's making a run in to the United box to try and get on the end of this pass. This is absolutely bonkers.
But see, on the other side, then, United caused havoc down the flanks for Barcelona.
Definitely. It was essentially, you had both teams actually played quite fluid formations, really. Yeah. I think obviously Cruyff that was how he played anyway, and you can see when you look at I was chatting to you about this, when you look at that Barcelona team, you can see the thread going directly from Cruyff to Guardiola, and the way that Guardiola looks at the game, having a lot of ball players. You've got Guardiola in this team, you've got Koeman, even the two centre-halves are good on the ball, and then essentially you had the two wing-backs, Sergi, who was a really, really good player, played for Spain. The guy on the other side, Luis, we'll get to him soon enough. He really struggled. But then you had four attackers in Jose Bakero, who was great, and then you had Romario, Stoichkov and Begiristain. It was just incredible to even go, we're away from home in Europe, let's play four attackers and like two defenders. That makes sense. But United is interested as well. Obviously, United were hamstrung to an extent. Obviously, we were a little bit naive tactically at times, but they were hamstrung by that foreigner rule. You could only have three non-home-produced players in your team.
You could argue that Cantona's suspension lessened the headache for Fergie.
Yes, it did, because the temptation would have been to play him. But oddly, I think not having him in this game gave United a greater tactical discipline. I'm sort of convinced that we'll get into more of the flow of the game in a minute, but there was a period in the game about half an hour in where I think had United managed to get a second goal to double their lead, they would have gone on and won the game. But it was interesting. So this game, obviously Schmeichel's in goal, who didn't play the next game in Barcelona because of this rule, and Gary Walsh rather infamously played that game, the poor guy. And then, so Paul Parker played at centre-half. I was a big fan of Paul Parker. He was a terrific player. He was part of what you call United's little dream team that they had back then, where there was sort of a definitive 11 that would play. That I think they only managed to play together about 20 times in the 93-94 season, but did not lose a single game when that 11 played, and he was a part of that. But played at centre-half because he was a brilliant man marker. And they wanted someone to basically man-mark Romario. And then you had Pallister with him at centre-half. I mean, I like Pallister, but he did have lapses in concentration at times, which is a nice way of putting it. And then Dennis Irwin, always brilliant. Dennis Irwin will always play. As long as he was fit, he would play. And then David May, who is a guy that I just momentarily forget ever played for Manchester United, but was actually at the club for about 5 years.
David May looked like he literally just got up out of bed, got dressed, and left his hair any old way.
Yeah, he was. David May, the most memorable thing, the greatest memory I have of David May is him doing a John Terry in the Champions League final and celebrating like he played and won the game, despite the fact that he played virtually no part in United's treble-winning campaign whatsoever at that point. And in the midfield, so, much as you get now, when the broadcasters put out the teams, they are given, people that don't know, the broadcasters get given, and all the journalists are given team sheets with a formation. That's what they're given before the game. So when when people try and argue the toss with broadcasters and they say, well, why have they said that the team's playing like this? Clearly they don't, because that's what they were given before the game. And United's summation was initially lining up as a 4-3-1-2. So you had the back four, and then you had Keane, Ince, Kanchelskis, with Butt further ahead of them. I suspect Nicky Butt was there to try and press Koeman and Guardiola and try and break up their rhythm and stop getting on the ball. People always forget, because of the fondness of Paul Scholes, for a long time, Nicky Butt was actually much more favoured for United in big matches. And he was the first one after Giggs from that class of 92 to make the break into the first team. I'm a big fan of Nicky, but I think
he was a terrific
player.
He was
a really, really good player. He was a genuine top class midfield player. And then you had nominally Lee Sharpe and Mark Hughes up front, but what tended to happen is Ince and Keane would drop in and form a three, where would any one of the three would generally advance at any one time, although Ince tended to sit back a little bit more, and then Kanchelskis and Sharpe would pull out to the flanks with Hughes basically occupying Abelardo and Nadal in the middle. And Nadal sort of sat on Hughes more than Abelardo, which I kind of get because they needed someone to compete with Hughes physically. But down the flanks, I mean, you mentioned Kanchelskis and Sharpe just caused absolute havoc, with Irwin overlapping on the left-hand side with Lee Sharpe as well. And Keane tended to pull out onto the left-hand side as well. So essentially, what United were actually doing is, Luis, who was playing on the right wing, essentially Luis and Sergio were wing backs. They weren't full backs, they were playing as wing backs. Luis was not first choice. The first choice of Barcelona was Albert Ferrer. Ferrer was one of what is known as the dream team, that Barcelona team that won the European Cup 92 and won 3 La Liga titles in a row. He wasn't available for this game, so they played Luis, and United targeted him ruthlessly. I mean, Irwin, you'd see at times that literally Irwin, Keane and Sharpe would just overload on the left-hand side, and they just overran Luis. And the game started at such a furious pace. And you could see Barcelona really, really struggled.
Yeah, they did.
And Koeman, this is the thing, Koeman was great in the second half. In the first half, he was almost non-existent. Like, he could barely get in the game. And that was because he wasn't able to get the ball, really. And essentially just had this, what looked like a chasm between sort of the defenders and essentially the 4 up front that they had, Barcelona, and then the other 6 players, and there was just like a huge gap between the two because the other 6 could not break out the push up, especially in the case of Luis and Sergio, because they were afraid of leaving the space behind for Kanchelskis and Sharpe. And the goal comes from that work down the flanks. The first goal was a great, lovely little ball from Paul Ince. Actually, he was such a good player, Paul Ince. He could do everything in the midfield. It's a lovely weighted pass. He plays it into Lee Sharpe on the left, and he just sends in a beautiful cross to Mark Hughes. He just heads it in. Classic Mark Hughes, getting his head on the ball. And it's 1-0.
Koeman was caught in no man's land.
Pardon?
Koeman was caught in no man's land.
Yeah, he was. Which was the thing with Koeman, was he always had some proper defenders in there with him, to sort of, just in case he did go wandering off like that. He was absolutely nowhere. And there's more poor defending I'm going to get to later with United on the second goal. We'll get to that later. But for them, like the next 10 minutes, United just absolutely all over Barcelona, really, from the 20 to the 30-minute mark. There was Hughes had a great chance about half an hour in. Sharpe down the left again, sends a wonderful ball in to Hughes, and he just mishits it. He just mishits it. And the thing with Hughes is, because of the time it was almost like for a second he didn't realise how much time he had. He had a lot of space for someone who was just outside the 6-yard box. He literally could have taken a touch and then just smashed it into the net. And I think had United gone 2-0 up, they would have gone on and won this game. I wouldn't have envisioned Barcelona coming back from 2-0 down.
I think, looking back at the first half overall, though, United got pretty much everything right.
They were excellent.
You'd say, bar if the crossing was a bit better, they would have been going in further ahead. They would have been going in the lead.
Chelsea's crossing was a little askew, particularly
it was,
that day. I think Sharpe's delivery was much better. Unusually, it used to be the way around. Sharpe used to have an issue with delivery, so Ferguson used to play more centrally to score goals. But I think the killer for United was the Barcelona goal, which came about 5 or 6 minutes after Hughes had that chance. And this was pretty much the only thing Barcelona did of note in the whole first half, apart from Nadal making a mad run from his own box into the United box the first 5 minutes. And it's Koeman who starts to move He runs out from the defence with the ball, which is what you expect people like Koeman to do. Plays the ball into Bakero, who just plays an absolutely... Oh, my goodness. Bakero was a brilliant player. And he's one of those players when you look back and think, why was Spain at international level so bad when you had people like Guardiola and Bakero and Begiristain in your team? But it was an incredible reverse slide rule pass. And then the one time the United defence loses Romario, he runs in behind because David May stupidly played him onside. And then it's a lovely finish actually as well. He hits it first time, doesn't he? And I think that was the point where Koeman started to assert himself in the game. Just a detail I want to pick up on. You never see this anymore. Ferguson was interviewed at half-time in this game.
Yeah.
What?
I don't know how they got him to agree to that, but I noticed that as well. I was like, when did this ever happen? But he was happy with the performance in the first half. He said he was very pleased. Yeah,
and Danny Sloan and Terry Venables said the same thing. He said they did pretty much everything right, and if they kept doing that, they'd be okay. But the problem was, I think the goal, just gave Barcelona a bit of the thing of, okay, we're still in this game.
Yeah, the thing is though, if you give Romario that kind of space, he doesn't require many touches. He didn't. To let a player like that in, and he's dribbling too. He was almost, it reminded me looking back at clips of Garrincha, his balance and the way he just drifted in there. He could turn so quickly behind. He's an incredible player.
Yeah, he was really strong as well, deceptively strong as Romario, because he was quite short and stocky and had a low centre of gravity. He was brilliant. Somebody reminds me of him now a little bit is Sergio Aguero. Has a little bit of Romario about him. I would say Aguero does a lot more work off the ball than Romario ever did.
Could you say Hazard is a shit Romario?
No, never. I mean, I love Eden Hazard. I think he's brilliant. Different. I'd say Hazard is more of a midfielder than a forward, I think. No, I'm not having that.
So you mentioned briefly that Nicky Butt was coming through at this time, and they brought on Paul Scholes late in the match. The commentator noted he was saying a young striker. It's funny looking back at members of Class 92 in those days with the haircuts and the tin frames, and these boys were just so oblivious to what was to come.
Incredibly baggy shirts.
Yeah, exactly, and short shorts.
Yeah, it was. It was. And was Nicky Butt then? Was he 19, 20 years old, I think, at this point?
Yeah.
I loved him. He was one of those players who was. He seemed to be. If you ever came across the analysis of European journalists, the South American journalists, they loved Nicky Butt because they recognised someone who was tactically a very clever player, technically a much better player than he was ever given credit for. I think people just sort of look back and remember him as a workhorse. He was actually a wonderful passer of the ball. He was pretty good at running with the ball as well.
He did the simple
you think about England's 2002 World Cup run, Nicky Butt really was a key player for England in the midfield. And you have to remember, this is an England who went into the competition without Steven Gerrard, who was probably the informed midfielder that England had. And Nicky Butt sort of underpinned the whole midfield. He brought everything together. He gave them a shape. He gave them a discipline. He was absolutely terrific. I was a huge fan. But the second half, really, this game, it was, you talk about a game of two halves. It was all Barcelona for a lot of this second half. They took Luis off, probably for his own mental well-being, because he'd just been absolutely decimated in the first half. And he brought on a guy called Eusebio, who is a midfielder. He was another midfielder. So he brought on another ball-playing midfielder and then basically moved Abelardo to the right. And I think Guardiola was kind of playing at centre-half at this point. And then Koeman was just playing wherever he pleased, really. At this point in the game, he was just he would periodically drop into defence to come and get the ball if he wanted to, or then he'd pop up on the right. I think you mentioned this week, he just does one bit where he just pops up on the right hand side. In fact, the Barcelona second goal where they take the lead, which is about 5 minutes after the break, they come out after the second half. He just pops up on the right hand side, plays a magnificent ball into Bakero, who the thing I've got in my notes is appalling marking in capital letters, because Bakero's on his own in the United area. He's got 4 red shirts around him. Yeah. Nobody closes him down. And Bakero literally has time to take the ball down, control it, set himself, and then finish.
It was
just
the ball,
going ballistic.
It was the ball from Koeman, though. I think they literally shocked probably United, because no one saw that ball being looped over like that. I know you'd expect concentration levels to be high, but I think that pass was picked out of nowhere.
I mean, it was, but I mean, for goodness sake, when there's 4 of you with nobody to mark in a box, you let someone take a touch before they hit it, that's I'll quote a very angry Roy Keane in an Ipswich Town press conference: should have cleared the ball. Don't let the ball bounce in your area. It was poor defending, because United generally defended very well in this game.
That's the thing, though, isn't it? This game, United would have won this game if it wasn't for such sloppy defending.
Yes, I think so. It was sloppy defending and a combination of just the flashes of brilliance of... This was the Cruyff Barcelona team coming towards the end of his cycle. I think it was the next... They didn't actually win anything this season, Barcelona, and they didn't win anything the next season. And Cruyff had an enormous falling out with the president at the time, Jose Luis Núñez, and that was it, really. And this was already the point where I think Guardiola was starting... get him and Cruyff, so they basically said Cruyff was starting to grate on his players. So Laudrup... Real Madrid actually won the league, I think, this season. Laudrup had gone to Real Madrid in the summer. So the previous season, Barcelona had actually got to the final of the competition and they lost 4-0 to AC Milan. They got absolutely decimated in that game. And that was quite an infamous game, because that was sort of at the point where the falling out between Guardiola and Michael Laudrup occurred. And you could pretty much chart the downfall of that Barcelona team to that game, the 4-0, and when that happened. And really the next game, when United and Barcelona played each other and Barcelona beat us 4-0, that was sort of the last kind of flash of brilliance from that team before it imploded.
The less said about that game, the better.
I know. But it's amazing when you look at the personalities in that team that it didn't happen sooner. When you look at people like Koeman and Romario and Stoichkov, and you wonder how this team managed to hold together for as long as it did.
Speaking of Stoichkov, though, he made an absolute meal, didn't he? When he seen he made a meal of one particular challenge, and once he seen the stretcher come, and he was up like right as rain.
If you were putting together a Bastards 11, Stoichkov would be your first pick up front, because he was a great player. I would have Stoichkov and Diego Costa up front in my Bastards 11. It would be a great front two, but it would also be a front two that you would just despise playing against, because he was great at games and shit. Stoichkov was a hard man, though, and he was a complete nutcase. For anyone who wasn't, anyone that's listened to this podcast who maybe Stoichkov was a little bit before their time, I saw enough of him. Great player. In fact, he'd just come off the '94 World Cup that year, where Bulgaria got to the semi-finals that year, and he
played a major role in it.
Yeah, I would say he was arguably the best player in that competition. When they finished 4th that year, that was the first World Cup I remember watching. And I would have said, for a lot of the games that I saw, they were the best team of the tournament. They were the best team to watch. And they were just really, really good. And they were I think they were just undone by like a rather brilliant Roberto Baggio in the semi-final.
Would Paul Ince make your Bastards 11?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. He was brilliant. And he was United's best player in the second half. When United were being completely overrun.
He picked everyone up. Because United were under a lot of pressure with Barcelona. We mentioned that they were all overs in the second half, and he was the experienced player that lifted everyone else up and was driving force in midfield. But just something as well, it was a great combination with Seth and Keane. So when Keane was able to drive forward, both of them were as hard as nails. So they could go to battle with anyone.
I think I remember Keane saying that Ince was his favourite midfield partner that he had as well.
I'm not surprised, yeah.
But yeah, hard as nails, both technically brilliant footballers, could do everything. When I was talking about Bobby Charlton before, these are two midfielders in that mould, maybe not technically as good as Charlton was, but they certainly had that about them. And when you look at, obviously, this was an interesting season for United as well, because United didn't win anything this season. It was weird. At this point in the season, United were in a great position. They were, by the December, they were cantering towards the league title. And actually, going into this game, the first two games, United had beaten Gothenburg, a good Gothenburg team that got to the quarterfinals of the competition this year, finished top of this group. They were a good side. Jasper Blomqvist was actually in that team. They were a good team, had several members of the Sweden 94 World Cup team that finished third in there. And we'd beaten them 4-2 in the first game. And then we'd gone to Istanbul, played Galatasaray. We got a point there and actually beat Galatasaray in the return game, which sort of exercised kind of the demons of the previous year somewhat. But it was interesting, really, where United collapsed was the two games after this, where we lost to Barcelona and Gothenburg away from home. That finished us off, really. Not getting them, or maybe not getting a 1-0 win or something in Istanbul was really what finished us off. But yeah, I mean, pretty much for most of the second half, Koeman was just running the game, and Ince was sort of putting out fires. Like you said, he was picking everybody up, organising the defence. He was. I would have said, for me at this point for this team, Ince was the leader really more than. I mean, United had a few leaders in the team, but I felt Ince was him and Bruce were the two sort of generals, and Hughes were the generals who sort of marshalled that team.
See, even for United's second goal, Ince's work, and to get that ball to Roy Keane and drive through how many players, just complete another determination and strength. That was an unbelievable goal, but it showed too, these were two top quality teams that could play good football. United, again, coming in from the flank with Keane with a low cross, and then to cheekily backheel it, flick it into the back of the net. A remarkable goal.
That was a brilliant goal. In fact, all four of the goals in this game were really, really good goals. It was really high quality football. I think the thing that sort of turned things back in United's favour was when they brought Steve Bruce on for David May, and then Paul Parker went out into the right. And Steve Bruce, people often forget, was a really good ball-playing defender who provided a big threat on set pieces for United as well. But he just seemed to help. Having Bruce come on it gave Ince a little bit more help in there, and he seemed to settle everything down a little bit more in defence. That then allowed Ince to exert his influence further up the field, and it was a great bit of pressing to win the ball that he did to then sort of set Keane on the right. That finish, it was a good ball, but the ball was slightly behind Lee Sharpe, and Lee Sharpe literally doesn't even. For me, I think I had Sharpe as man of the match actually in this game for how good he was in the first half, and then the ball's slightly behind him and he doesn't even break stride. He just goes, right, I'm just going to flick this to the back heel into the bottom left hand corner, and Busquets is just stood there and what in the world has just happened? And you can see, I think it's Nadal has gone, what just happened there? Who's this guy from the Midlands who's just slotted this ball into the bottom corner?
Yeah,
and then sort of that gave United it just gave us a second wind of energy. There was, they had a really good chance of it. It was Bruce played this fantastic long ball into Kanchelskis on the right. He plays it down, and it's initially the ball looks like it's going to fall to Sergi. Kanchelskis just robs the ball off him, picks his pocket, and then just laid the ball off for Sharpe. And it's Nadal that just gets in the way of the ball. I think there was a shout for a handball, but you couldn't really.
Yeah, I know, but
you didn't get the replay, so you couldn't really see it. Now there would have been about 15,000 replays. You didn't really get that then. It was just the director just move on. This game's still going.
I reckon it was handball.
Yeah, it was. I'd have to go back and look at it again, but I really couldn't tell. And I think, you have to remember at this point there's no VAR.
Yeah.
So the referee and the officials, they've got to go off their first look, and you have to say, if I was the referee, you look at the position the referee was in, I don't think he would have been able to really see whether that was a handball or not. And if he can't see it, you can't give them.
I can imagine this game, by the way, it's available on YouTube, full to watch. But I can imagine some of the recent comments under this. Yeah, our kids, go to VAR, go to VAR.
I know, and it's incredible. The other thing that really struck me about this game was how different Old Trafford seemed to look.
Yeah.
Back then, I felt like I was just looking at a completely different stadium than what it is now. And I think Paul Scholes actually appeared in this game as well, and he actually set up he had a great chance. He robs the ball off Guardiola. This is about a minute from the end of normal time, and Busquets is off his line, and he goes to try and chip him, and he just misses. He's so close. You think, had he been maybe half a yard further back when he made the chip, it would have gone in. It was so close, and I thought, God, can you imagine if he'd have got that goal? I think, and then literally within the same minute, Barca go up the other end, a cross comes in, and this is, apart from the goal, this is the only other time Romario does anything in this game. He gets in, Steve Bruce, with just this incredible interception. The ball looks like Romario was going to get it, and if Romario had got it, he would have scored. The Barca would have won the game. Bruce just appears out of nowhere, one of those last-ditch saving clearance, interceptions, and then a great clearance away. I think Phil Jones, when he does these things in his head, thinks he's Steve Bruce doing this, but actually he's not, because he just wasn't paying attention to what was going on for the previous 5 minutes, and then he goes, oh shit, I need to get in there and throw myself into this 50-50 challenge using my head.
I think one of my favourite quotes, looking back at the commentary, was I think it was Keegan that said it. When people like David May stay down, they're usually injured. What does that mean exactly? Do you know, if people are injured, they usually stay down?
I think, it's not quite up in terms of Michael Owen's inanity when he makes comments like, if you can't score, you probably won't win the game and all that kind of thing. It's not at that level. Like, I understood what Keegan meant when he said that. I think he's sort of making out and said, if it was, say, like, I don't know, if it was Stoichkov or Romario, you'd probably think, they're not hurt. And you just mentioned the point with Stoichkov where he stays down and then he sees a stretch and he's like, I'm not fucking going anywhere.
Yeah, no, it's funny because there's a lot of the punditry. It's they were much more outspoken as well about things. I see there was a few digs from Keegan about football in general that he was thrown into the commentary, whereas nowadays it's much more polished.
Yeah, I kind of I quite enjoyed that. I mean, obviously I'm not advocating Big Ron being racist towards Marcel Desailly, which is what got him kicked off. But I kind of liked the fact that actually I found the punditry really the only... I love watching Gary Neville and Jamie Carragher now because they're two guys that are really incisive and can deliver stuff in a way that you can understand, but is also accurate and also gets you to interpret the game or see things that you may not have seen before, which is why Neville and Carragher are so good. But for me, I loved Venables and Law. Their punditry afterwards was just fantastic. You talk about being, it was outspoken. I have to say, I still kind of preferred Keegan than I prefer most co-commentators now. I mean, the only ones I like in terms of co-commentators, again, are Neville and Carragher, really, because they're the only ones that really add anything of value to the game. I do like Danny
Higginbottom. I rate Danny Higginbottom highly.
He's okay. I don't see enough of it. He doesn't seem to be on TV enough.
Yeah, he used to do the Friday night games or so on Sky Sports, but when he did even the smaller games, it's very insightful. His columns and that on before big United games tactically, he's a step ahead.
It is, and I remember when Gary Neville was talking about punditry when he did the off the ball thing that he did with Roy Keane,
Yes.
the show that they did, and he was talking about, there is a skill in doing punditry well. You see a lot of pundits on TV. I don't think a lot of them are very good, because you've got to really engage people and say stuff in a way. You've got to demonstrate knowledge, and you do have to do some research to be a good pundit or a good analyst. You just do. You have to do research, and I think the thing that why Neville and Carragher are so good is because they do their research. But you look back then. I think Teddy Venables, when he was doing the publishing for this game, was the England manager, so he obviously was still actively involved in the game. You could see Dennis Law was someone who just loved watching football and still loved thinking about the game, even though maybe he really wasn't keen on being a manager. But then you have to then deliver that in a way that's just going to engage people sat watching it at home. And I love Bob Wilson's presenting as well, because it's just he doesn't try and overtake the broadcast. It's just very simple in delivery. And the thing about Bob Wilson that I always loved as well is that I always remember watching these Champions League games, you always got that kind of, he was able to present things in a way where it felt like a big occasion.
Of course.
And that's what I loved about the ITV Champions League coverage. The problem is now is that I think they try and make a big occasion of every game, even if it's, I always think of the Mitchell and Webb sketch where David Mitchell's taking the mickey out of the Sky Sports football coverage, and they're making a big deal out of Shrewsbury versus Macclesfield. And it kind of detracts from the gravitas of when you get a really important game. When Super Sunday is Newcastle United versus Aston Villa, that's not Super Sunday.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You see, as well as that, the media have a lot of responsibility in that, because you see big Champions League games nowadays, it's built up around individual stars like Neymar, Pogba. When those players are coming together, games are almost built up on that. But I think the beauty of this game that we're talking about beforehand, it was about football institutions and about two big footballing gladiators coming together, good ideologies and good teams bubbling, rather than just a circus in the media. This was about football.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the other thing was, I sort of touched on this briefly, because football wasn't on. This is at the early stages of football becoming a big mass media thing in the way that it is now. So this is still in its infancy, and you couldn't find European leagues as easily. So there was also the speciality of, Stoichkov and Romario and Koeman are coming to town, and it really, really meant something. And I always think it must have made. See, really, this was kind of the last point, I feel, and I mentioned this when I talked about Cantona in Istanbul and Galatasaray. This is probably the last point where, when you had your away games in Europe, they really were away games, because you might have not have been able to do as much scouting on the opposition, which makes it difficult. And also, I know this is not the Stone Age, but even back in the early to mid-90s, travelling was still slightly more arduous and not as simple and as accessible to everyone as it is now. So it really made, away games really were away games then. And I think you got the sense of that from Barcelona in the first half. They were like, Jesus, what is this? They were not prepared at all. And you have to remember at this time, English football always had this reputation as, although the big European leagues don't fill their grounds regularly, Barcelona are notorious for not filling the Nou Camp. They don't often fill it. It's a big problem for them. So suddenly coming to this stadium where, and sort of, it's only really kind of in the last couple of months really where I've seen the atmosphere at Old Trafford pick up again. But back at this period in time, the atmosphere at Old Trafford in the 90s was absolutely blistering. It was so loud. It was just incredible. And the whole game, the volume of the game was, even watching through this video, the atmosphere is absolutely just incredible in this game. And the noise when Hughes gets that opening goal, it's just a roar. And I thought, God, if you'd have been living in one of those houses at near Old Trafford, you'd have felt that. Absolutely. And you would almost certainly have heard it. So that was just special. And the other thing as well was, this was at a point in time where the Champions League was just for the champions. This is the first year we are in the 16-team 4 group stages going into the knockout format. I mentioned the previous week how they've been messing around with the format for the first couple of years. So this was the team that sort of sets the year for the template that you have now. But they were only the league champions, or the holders could compete in here. So AC Milan had qualified this year, even though they didn't win the league in Italy the previous year. It was Juventus that won it the league the previous year, I believe. I think it was Juventus. So it was Juventus. And that was it. To get into this competition, you either had to win the competition the year before, or you win your league, or you don't get in.
Yeah.
And I think the other issue that I have with the Champions League now is that there's too many teams in it. I think there's too many teams in European football, which is in these European competitions, which I know is what UEFA want, because they want to build towards this European Super League. But it really just dilutes it to a point where I think the Champions League is quite boring now. Whereas really, going into even match day 5 when we played IFK Gothenburg in Sweden, this whole group was up in the balance. Barcelona finished second in this group. Barcelona and United finished on the same number of points in this group. Barcelona went through on the head-to-head and the goals scored and the goal difference. That was why Barcelona went through. But we finished on the same points. So it was just a little bit of naivety, I think, in the second half of this game, and then probably the Gothenburg game that really cost us. The second Gothenburg game that really cost us, because we won 2 of them and we drew 2 games and we only lost 2. And Barca were exactly the same. But, you know, it was because Barca had actually lost to Gothenburg the previous match day. They lost like 4-0 or something like that. They took a hammering of Gothenburg. So it's really interesting, but this is where, and then obviously the next time we came back into the Champions League, which was 96, 97, which we went all the way to the semi-finals that year. So I think you started to maybe see the early part of Ferguson started to get more of a grasp of European football and trying to set up a team in a way where you could really counter the opposition. Rather than just go, we'll just play like we usually do and win a game, because that didn't work the season before. And in the end, we didn't quite get it in this group either. But I think the big thing that made the difference as United was the UEFA getting rid of that ridiculous foreigner rule. And it wasn't it's not just English clubs that had a problem with it. All the leagues had a problem with this rule. It's absolutely ridiculous. It's just a stupid rule, stopping like a movement of people. Essentially, you're stopping the movement of people across different countries because you want to have this nonsense rule about preserving homegrown players, which I don't buy into.
I was trying to find out what year they got rid of that.
It was I think they'd gotten rid of it. This was the last season it was in, so they got rid of it for the next season.
Okay. Yeah, it's a crazy rule that it was even allowed in the first place.
Yeah, but they got rid of it the next season, thankfully. But yeah, it was just absolutely ridiculous rule. But it was testament to the players that we did have, that even with the people missing in this game, we were as competitive as we were.
Absolutely.
I thought we were absolutely fantastic in this game.
Yeah. No, absolutely. One of my favourite moments of the game was after we got the second goal, the equaliser, and it was time for United to hold on. Instantly, it was a time that United needed to show they meant business. And Pallister absolutely smashes one of the Barcelona players. This means business.
I think it was Begiristain.
I think
he
it
just
was.
Absolutely hammered him.
Absolutely smashed. But that's it. This team had leaders and characters. That was one of my favourite things watching this game, was the likes of Ince. The scene, even in the first half, Peter Schmeichel and Paul Parker had a bit of a coming together, and there was proper verbal actions, on camera afterwards, and the players were having a proper go at each other. It was, you don't really see enough of that nowadays, and if you do, a big deal is made of it.
No, definitely. There was a bit. I think Barcelona had a passage of play in the second half, which was my favourite moment of the game. In fact, I think it was that bit towards the end where Bruce managed to sort of make the interception and clear the ball from Romario. That did not stop Peter Schmeichel charging out of his goal and but I don't know who he was bollocking. It was just like, I've got to shout at someone here, so I'm just going to shout at anyone. It's just like anyone that I could shout at. It was crazy. It was crazy. But the interesting thing with Barcelona's goalkeeper Busquets was not usually seen as first choice. I think prior to Cruyff coming in, it was Zubizarreta, but Zubizarreta and Cruyff just didn't get along at all. And then he liked Busquets because he could play the ball out with his feet. And Cruyff just sort of would deal with the fact that I'll deal with the fact that he makes mistakes, just to sort of have him in the team, really. Because I felt like you talk about Koeman being in no man's land, but Busquets' positioning for the Hughes goal wasn't good either.
No, it wasn't. He didn't really contest at all, really.
No, he didn't. No.
But yeah, have you any other points you want to bring up before we wrap it up, Mike?
I think it's just interesting, you know, we obviously the previous season we had cantered to the league title and the double, and then it just shows, I think, the greater prestige that this competition had, because I feel like the only thing that maintains the prestige of this is the money now for the teams coming in, but that then there was a real genuine prestige to this tournament. And you could see with this game that in the Premier League we would be brushing teams aside. In fact, even though Blackburn won the league this season, we played Blackburn it was not long after this, and we absolutely hammered them. And they were our main competition for the league title. But the step up in quality into the Champions League from the Premier League was just enormous, and it really demonstrated how far behind English football had fallen during that Heysel ban, so far behind. And it really wasn't until, even though obviously United got good in European football really in the late 90s, but no one else, or the English teams, really caught up with United until the turn of the century. Because Arsenal, even when they went and won the league, they were very poor in Europe for a long time. They just couldn't really hack it in the Champions League. And apart from the odd outlier here and there, I think obviously United winning the Cup Winners' Cup in '91. That was the first year that they come out of the ban. And then I think Arsenal won the Cup Winners' Cup about 2 or 3 years later. But other than that, really the Cup Winners' Cup was sort of the third competition. Really, you look at it, the Champions League was the main one. The UEFA Cup was an incredibly difficult trophy to win because basically you had to finish second in your league to get in it. I always remember, for me, I always remember the UEFA Cup final. I always remember it was the Ince versus Lazio one from, I think it was 98, where Ronaldo was playing for Inter. And it's just incredible. And you think someone like Ronaldo should be playing in the Champions League. Back then, the UEFA Cup was a real prestige competition to win. And when it came to the UEFA Cup and the Champions League, English was nowhere near, really. And it took us probably about 10 to 15 years for us to compete at a regular. Only United were competing really at the requisite level because we were in it all the time. No one else was really competing at all.
No, yeah, this did become the landmark, but now you feel, there's so much commercialism in football. There's a different kind of feel, even when before the game started, and the commentators are, there genuine excitement around it. Nowadays, it's not quite about the sport, is it?
No, not really. It's not. No, I don't have a problem with obviously focusing on great players and stuff, but there is a sense of that almost the games have become secondary. And like I said, the Champions League really, until you get to the last 8 now.
Yeah, that's when it gets exciting. Before that,
it's so boring. Yeah. Essentially, you've got several months of unsatisfying foreplay.
But look, I know you mentioned obviously back then it was the champions that got in, but nowadays in the group stage you go through each game week when the group stage is taking place. There's a lot of fixtures you're putting your X through saying you've no interest in watching. And this is the Champions League. There shouldn't be any game that less significant. Do you know what I mean? They should be top clubs, top teams.
No, I always used to watch the highlights, actually, that they'd show later on at night as well, when you could see all the other teams.
Yeah.
When it was still a real novelty to see them. And then whoever was in the final every year, I would always watch it, which is why the Juventus team always sticks in my memory. Obviously, Italian football being on Channel 4 at this point, you could watch it. And then, obviously, they were in 3 European Cup finals in a row. And that's why I always remember the Ajax team that Van Gaal had, because that was the first Champions League final that I ever remember watching, because that was on terrestrial TV, and it was like, oh, I have to watch this. This is Ajax and AC Milan. Like you have to watch this game, and that's gone. That's definitely gone that now, and you can just tell with the atmospheres at the games as well. You watch the atmospheres of European games, these Champions League games.
The Cup winners,
15 to 20 years
Barcelona,
ago.
that atmosphere was unbelievable.
Yeah. There was the fans, everyone got the sense that this is really, really special. You know, even if it was a group stage game, it didn't matter. Every game was special. It really mattered. It's like, we are seeing a level of football here that we're not going to see every week. So now she's just not getting that. In some ways, I feel like the level, really, as you said, up until the last 8, I feel like the level, if you look at the top domestic leagues, so you take Germany, England, Italy and Spain, or maybe not Spain right now, but certainly Germany, Italy and England, I feel like the level and the competitiveness in the leagues is higher than it is in any of the European competitions, really up until those quarterfinals. Yeah,
possibly. Yeah, as well as that, there's always kind of, till teams get to that stage of the Champions League nowadays, first legs and second legs, they don't take as many risks as they do when they're later on in the rounds, so they don't see those rounds as significant either until they get to it.
No, absolutely. Pining for a time that's long gone, because that's all we can do right now. I can't even go anywhere.
Yeah, exactly. We'll have to do another match in the next week or two, Mike. Next week we might do something different again. We might even do a podcast on a different icon that you don't plan on writing about, but we might do a focus on a historic United figure.
I think that's a good idea,
yeah, so we've come up with some ideas. If you have any ideas for podcasts, the podcast topics, send us a tweet at STRETTYCAST. We're also on Patreon at /Stretty News. The blog is full of news every day on United, so it's at StrettyNews.com. And Mike, how can people follow you on Twitter?
So I'm at Mycroft_Holmes, or just look for Northern Loudmouth. I would have been tagged actually in the tweet that went out on the STRETTYCAST Twitter account earlier today, so you can find me on there as well.
Yeah.
I do my own sideline stuff, writing about films, so you can just find that at northernloudmouth.com, and it's North by Northwest Film Blog. You can find that on there, writing about films past and present. So that's where you can find me. Honestly, if you're expecting much of a reply from me, it's going to be fairly intermittent.
That's it for this week then. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you again soon. Stay safe.